Welcome to the first of a three-part series, Tools for Families, and this one is focused on addressing the social and emotional well-being of the entire family. First, I'd like to introduce three individuals, three leaders in New Jersey who envisioned this series. And Pat, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you, Mary Beth. Hi, I'm Pat Wright. I am the Executive Director of the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association, and I welcome you to this webinar tonight. It is my pleasure always to collaborate with the PTA, and we were discussing, Kathy Lindenbaum and I, who you'll hear from in a minute, we're discussing how hard this has been for parents to live through this time when our worlds are basically turned upside down. Our children at home are home no matter what age. Our smallest kids to our college kids, right? Our children are home with us again. We're trying to help them stay up with their studies and current with their schoolwork. Many parents have experienced they're working from home. So they're trying to work remotely when their students are working remotely, their kids are working remotely. Some people have lost their jobs, which adds just more stress to the situation. So we thought about ways that we can really help parents in some way, even some small way, and came up with the idea of this webinar series. And tonight, we're really going to talk about what we think is really paramount, right? And that is making sure that everybody is healthy physically and socially and emotionally. And that's going to be our topic tonight. I'd like to introduce Kathy Lindenbaum, the president of the New Jersey PTA. And thank you again, Kathy, for collaborating with us on this project.
Hi, I'm Kathy. I want to thank Pat Wright and the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association for including New Jersey PTA in this collaboration, and thank you to all the presenters. Tonight, we're going to share ideas on how to help families navigate through this very challenging time. We hope that this is a helpful resource for you, and I thank you for joining us tonight. And I'd like to introduce Jim Lukash from NJSCA.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the New Jersey School Counselors Association, I'd like to extend a very cordial welcome to everyone this evening. Again, thank you to the Principals and Supervisors Association and the New Jersey PTA for including the counselors in this webinar. I'd like to say to the parents, please, if you have a school counselor back at your building, please be in touch with them. They can be a very important partner in supporting your children. Enjoy the webinar this evening.
So I'd also like to mention that we've had a very large development team, and that team of experts throughout New Jersey in the fields of social and emotional well-being of children, adults, and adolescents. And while we had a large development team, it would have been very busy to listen to all those people. So there are three people who are really going to be capturing the essence of what the development team did. So I'd like to turn it over to George.
Good evening, everyone. My name is George Scott, and I'm associated with the Traumatic Loss Coalition of New Jersey. And we're interested in the emotional well-being of kids and school environments. But I was really proud to be invited to this webinar from the point of view of families. As a family therapist, what I recognize and what I want to highlight for each of you, regardless of where you are, regardless of what your family looks like, is that families have an amazing amount of strength, inherent strength. Like if you think about it, honestly, over the years, families would have died off if they weren't survivors, if they didn't take care of their young ones. And sometimes it's hard for us to even think about that when we recognize that we're in unprecedented times, difficult times, can't see the end of it yet, but trust me, we can get through this. Can we have the first slide? So being overwhelmed, let's make that real. That's natural. I think that most of us, if not all of us, in some way are overwhelmed by the responsibility that we have as the adults within a family or the adults within a home, maybe multiple adults within a home. And you take a look at this first slide, and You can see what the stressors are. You now have become the tutors and the teachers and making sure that the technology works and doing your regular routines. That hasn't gone away. On and on and on. And some of you maybe have lost your job. There's a stressor. And some of you are still working. So you worry about the virus and bringing the virus into the home. So what you know is that there are lots of really good reasons, natural reasons, acceptable and appropriate reasons why the family feels stressed right now. Next slide. So here are some of the challenges that we're facing. As unique and different as we are as families, and I like to refer to your family as the nest in which you and your kids live, as unique and different as you are, there's some common human factors that are part of that. Health, maintaining both physical and emotional health. The second part there, the second speaking point, is routines. It is so easy to forget routines. And let me bring up one right now that I think is critical for you as the adults, but also for the kids if you have kids in your family, and that is the routine of sleep. That sleep is an absolute critical attribute for us as human beings. In the absence of that, we become more cranky, more irritable, we get a brain fog, we get sad, our emotions are all over the place. A lot of that is because of sleep. And the issue is the routine. Even if it's difficult to manage routines during a non-crisis time because you're on different schedules, now that we're all together, the more that we can keep a similar schedule, it's really important. Same time to bed, same time up, same time breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They really help us to regulate the body. Children's behavior is expected to be different, sometimes more so, exaggerated. They do have a fear of what's going on. And here's another point for folks in terms of families. Moms and dads should have a responsibility of sheltering and buffering their kids from too much news. I know it's tough for your older kids who are on the internet a lot, but if you can avoid having serious conversations about the news in front of the kids, turn the TV off, give them some breaks, that can help them manage their fears and sadness. As a family therapist, I've heard for months and months, years and years, we just never have the time to be together. Well, you got your wish. Now we all have time to be together. And how do we find those things of how do we enjoy time? Now, there are numerous websites. There's lots of good information out there to give you ideas to use your own creativity with your children during the time when you're sheltered. And that last point there, staying connected, that's certainly staying connected inside the house or the apartment or where you live, or even the shelter, because I think of you families and you kids who are in shelters, that it's also using the social media to stay connected to other members of the family. Checking in with grandma, checking in with aunts and uncles, really important piece. Next slide, please. Now, here's a good way for us to take a look at what are our sources of strength. And I want to acknowledge that program. Please feel free to Google that, check that out, whether you're a school system administrator or you're a family. And what it is, if you take a look at the wheel, it identifies those 7 or 8 areas that are sources of our strength, that we pull our strength from, both individually, but also as a cluster. Let me give you an example. I like the one down there at generosity. If you take that slice of generosity and make it the theme for a day, then what you can do is to identify those people who in fact are demonstrating generosity. People in your own family that are checking in, making sure you have food, taking the dog for a walk, for instance. People who are generous with their time that makes other people then recipients of that. It's having a gratitude list of things that you're grateful for. And it's really nice to carve out some family time each day to put that on the table as generous, and then let each person go around the circle of the family and let them know who they see as generous. And then how do you demonstrate generosity among yourselves right within your family? See, if you take each of those, you can identify them, talk about them, You're going to be really surprised at what your little ones and your older ones and other adults in the family come up with. And then you build on those strengths. Always having that wheel, that's sources of strength. In fact, if you Google sources of strength, you can go online and grab that wheel off, print it out, put it up on your refrigerator, keep it in front of you, because it builds on the natural resiliency and strength of families. Is there another slide? Well, we always want to make sure that our kids get through this, but they'll get through this better if parents get through this, the adults in the house get through this. Some kids are raised by grandparents or foster parents, adoptive parents. Some are living, they're the families that are living together. It's really important that every day the adults make sure they take care of themselves. You can go down that list and see there's sleep again. Nutrition is number 2. Make sure your own nutrition doesn't suffer. Although I know there are some stories out there of the sacrifices that parents are making, and I applaud that and I honor those parents where perhaps you don't have an abundance of food or an abundance of funds to buy food. And what parents have a tendency to do is sacrifice self in favor of their children. Boy, I applaud that, but don't give up on yourself completely. So sleep and nutrition and exercise should be part of your self-care plan. Things that you do for self, alone time for self, where you can go, sit, be quiet, close your eyes, and in fact, just know that the attachment among the family will take care of yourself. And even though things will be different at the other end, what my belief is, we're going to be stronger in so many ways because we have had time to be together. Is there another slide? Perhaps that is it for my section.
Thank you very much, George. I failed to mention at the beginning that we are, we'll look for any questions that you have, and what we may do at the end is answer some of the frequently asked questions, but then we'll be looking at the questions as we go along, because we have almost 600 people on this. So it'd be a little bit difficult to make sure we answer everybody's question, but we will be doing that. And now, Caitlin, would you like to take over?
Sure. So I'm just waiting for my webcam. Oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. Good evening. So as George was talking about the importance of self-care for adults, of course, it's also very important that we have self-care for kids as well. And many of the things that work for adults, I'm sure anyone might not be surprised to learn, also work for kids. So you'll see repeats here, that the daily routine of bedtime, meal times, what we're doing during the day, which includes playtime for children, is really what keeps our kids feeling like the world is moving in a way that they understand. And usually when we understand what's happening, we feel safer. When we feel safer, we have better outcomes. We feel less stressed. We feel okay. And so sleep and eating, as George just explained, for the adults are also critical for our kids, as well as movement and exercise. Sometimes the staying home can make us feel as though we're also not moving very much. And I know not everyone has a ton of space that they'd be able to spend time in. But the more we can even do some stretches in the space that we are, make sure we reach to the sky, reach to the floor, any movement that your children can have in their bodies is going to not only just be good for their health, but also allow for their brains to take a cognitive break and move into a place that is going to be more restorative to their full brain. So moving their brain as well as thinking with their brain. And then virtual social time with friends, also something important for adults, but critical for kids as well. And I know my children, I have a 2nd grader and a 4th grader. My 4th grader is able to connect with friends through Google Classroom, but my 2nd grader is too young, according to the district, to be able to see his friends. And so other opportunities of doing that to make sure that kids feel connected is also very important. Next slide, please. So you might notice there's a routine in us saying routines, and we're early in the presentation still. So there are importances in routines: bedtimes, meal times, work time, which includes schoolwork, maybe chores, other things that need to get done around the home, and then playtime and free time. And this one is very crucial, I think, because I know for myself as a parent, I started to be very, very excited, but also overwhelmed with the many emails that started to come when we first began distance learning about all the different things that one could do. One could tour a zoo or learn about space from an astronaut or go tour a museum. There were so many amazing opportunities available to us, but it started to also become overwhelming to wonder whether or not our children needed to be scheduled every minute of the day. And what is critical to know is how important free time is, not just for kids, but for adults as well. That play, especially for young children, but really for all of us, is actually how we make sure that we stay healthy. We as a species, as humans, need to play in order to feel healthy. So free time, playtime, being playful together should be part of our routines. And it's not like, oh, then we're not doing anything, or all we're doing is playing. Sometimes people say, oh, you're just playing. Well, yeah, and that's okay, because that's part of what we need in our lives to stay as healthy as possible, and certainly to reduce stress. Next slide, please. Again, a routine of sleep, so important. And you can see in the graphic, a graphic that I think is fabulous, across the developmental spectrum, how much sleep do each of our ages need. You can see that adults, way down at the bottom there, 18 and older, need 7 to 9 hours of sleep, really, to actually feel like functional human beings. And many of us, I know, do not get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Then you might look at the school-age child needing almost 10 hours of sleep. So again, an importance of bedtimes, making sure that we establish a time to go to bed. And when we go to bed, we have a routine, whatever it might be. A lot of people do, in early childhood, we say bath, book, and bed. But it could be something similar. That's always the same pattern in the evening, which allows our bodies to get in a rhythm towards calming and a rhythm towards sleep, as well as the same time to get up in the morning. This is one that's tricky sometimes. We often hear about bedtimes and consistent bedtimes. We don't often hear about consistent wake-up times, but that's what really allows us to get in the rhythm of sleep, get into that cyclical body pattern, and our bodies can start to follow what it is that we need: constant bedtime routine, consistent wake-up routine. And the last piece is limiting access to media in the bedroom. Not only is part of what we will continually say in this evening's webinar, which is to limit exposure to media, but also we know that that blue light that comes out of screens, which we all are staring at a lot lately, it does kind of get our bodies and brains a little up at the time when we're actually wanting to sort of calm down. So limiting access to media in the bedroom can also really support our sleep routines. Next slide, please. This is important, right? For the adults to stay calm. And every time I talk about staying calm, I often have somebody, or even just myself in my head, say, how do we do that? Especially in this time when there's a stressor almost around every corner, ones that we expect and are part of our daily lives, and ones that we could never have possibly imagined in our wildest dreams. So how is it possible in the best of times to stay calm, but particularly now? And why is it important that we do that? Well, it's important because our children pay attention to how we are. I'll say that again. Our children pay attention to how we are. So not just what we say, but actually how we are. So you can imagine, think about even talking to an adult, and talking to an adult and they say to you, oh yeah, I'm fine, everything's okay, it's good, versus like this plastered smile, I'm fine. Oh no, I'm fine. You can tell the difference because the words are saying something, but the how you are is actually what's communicating the truth of how you are. And children pick up on that truth actually more than many adults do. They actually connect with our feelings, our movements, our gestures more than they do our words. So when we say we have to find our calm so we can lend our calm, it's because we want to be able to allow the child to feel from us what it feels like to feel calm. So when we express ourselves, we move our feelings out and we don't repress them in. When we repress them in, they stay there anyway, and eventually they sort of pop off like when you shake a soda bottle. So when you express yourself, you actually let them out, not repress. And then being positive reassuring allows the child to feel like they're in a space of safety. So when we find our calm, then we lend our calm to our children, and then the whole family system is able to stay in a calmer space at this time of high stress. Next slide, please. George, would you like to take this one?
We had talked about this earlier in terms of exposure. We have to, as adults, sometimes we are news junkies. We need to know everybody's opinion about everything. And if we're healthy as adults, we can let some things go. Our kids don't let it go as easily. They, in fact, absorb it. They try to make sense out of it, but it doesn't leave their body. It doesn't leave their thinking, and it doesn't leave their physical body. And that's where you'll see that last point there is too much exposure can be toxic. It affects the body's way of feeling, it affects the mood, and it affects the interaction. So it's really important going forward, even if kids have had a lot of exposure over the past 3 weeks, going forward, filter it. If you need to explain what's going on to your kids at their instructional level or their language level, please do that. But there again, try to keep your kids away from the craziness that goes on out in the world because they have trouble making sense out of it.
Yeah. Next slide, please.
And Caitlin is now going to be really focusing on the preschool and elementary age youngsters. And then we'll have someone talking about secondary and then a little bit more about families. So Caitlin?
Thank you. So every once in a while, somebody might wonder if infants, young children, elementary age children have mental health. I hear that a lot, and usually want to say, well, yeah, I hope so. It can feel like a term that isn't really applied to our youngest members of our families, our 3, 4, 5s, 6, 7, 8s even. So what is mental health in young children? It's really what all of us want, and it's the foundation of how we all become socially, emotionally well, relationally well as we go old. The first is to enjoy relationships with caregivers and friends. We want children to be able to enjoy their social relationships. We want them to be able to both play by themselves, being able to get lost in play. If you've ever been around a small child, you can sort of feel like there's a bubble around them when they're in their play space, as well as playing with others. We want to be able to be a social species, which is partly why this concept of social distancing has been so difficult, and I think brings about a ton of loss for a lot of us, because we are a social species. That's how humanity has survived over millennia. So we want kids to be able to play with others and be with others. We want them to express and feel all the emotions that we do as humans, and feel permission to do so, that they can feel both sad and happy and angry and scared and excited and joyful, and that they might feel all those things in one day. Some of our kids feel all those things in like 5 minutes, but that they can feel and express all of those emotions and feel permission to do so. That they also can go to adults to find comfort, as we talked about before, that we can find an adult who can help us get to calm, that adult can lend their calm to me. And that by doing that over and over and over again, to have an adult who can lend their calm and the child starts to feel what it feels like to feel calm, then the child's able to comfort themselves. That ultimately they're able to feel safe. Feeling safe is sort of at the foundation of all mental health. And then when we're safe, we can be curious. If we feel safe, we actually can sort of expand what we're looking for, where we are, who we're with, because ultimately, internally, we feel safe to do so. So that's mental health. And honestly, it's sort of not just for young kids, that's for all of us. But it's important to have an idea of what are we talking about when we're talking about getting good mental health or getting social emotional wellness in the young child population. Next slide, please. So here are some tips to help children during this pandemic. I'll read them out for you, and then we're going to spend some time slide by slide on each. The first is to be available, which seems simple, but for any of us who are also spending most of the minutes at home, for some of us who have other responsibilities, whether that be work or house caring or other children or pets or whatever it is that we have to do, sometimes being available is tricky, specifically being available every time that you're needed. The second thing is to let them know they're safe. As I just said, the feeling of safety, the internal understanding that one is safe is actually the foundation of all relational and emotional wellness. And so knowing that we're safe is significantly important and really hard to do at a time when we actually don't know that much about whether or not we're safe and how to keep safe. We're learning about new ideas every day. When we get those news ideas, though, we do want to teach our children what they should do to be safe. Kids feel better when they have some mastery over things, when they feel like they've got a little bit of control. Again, kids and adults feel that way. As our routine has been doing, creating daily routines helps kids, particularly building in time for family. And again, limiting exposure to news. What we typically say for young children specifically is that we want to share what kids need to know, but not all that you know. So we don't want to shield kids from truth. Kids find that out anyway, and then they don't trust you if you don't tell them. But we don't have to share everything we know, that we can share what is age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for the child. And in this particular situation, the kids are obviously going through it as well. They know they're not in school. They know they're not going to have their band concert or the choral concert or their baseball game. So denying them information is actually likely going to make them feel a little more scared, but making sure that we do so in a way that's developmentally appropriate for the child and not sharing everything we know. That is how we are the most helpful. Next slide, please. So to be available, we might say something like, we're paying attention and being responsive to our child's needs. So we might say something like, wow, in my head, you're moving all around today, so sit down. But we might instead say, I see your body has so much energy today. Do you want to go for a walk or have a dance party? We're being responsive to the child's need to move. Listening to our children and talking about their feelings. I see that you feel disappointed that you can't go to school and see your friends. Sometimes I use the phrase, I wonder if, because that usually allows a little space, because maybe we think they're disappointed, but maybe they're sad. And for them, that might be two different things. So I wonder if you're disappointed you can't go to school and see your friends. And then we might also get some questions that we have to answer. She's wearing a mask because she's keeping us safe by covering her mouth. And now we are wearing a mask because we're able to keep everyone else safe by covering our mouths. So again, we're not telling them everything they need to know about droplets, et cetera, right? But we're just explaining the story as it's important to them. Next question, please, or slide, please. Again, we need to let them know that they're safe. I can't say it enough. Feeling safe is the foundation for all relational and emotional wellness. So being able to point out the helpers, the leaders in our communities have made a plan for us to stay safe, and I'm going to also help you keep safe. When we see fire trucks or police cars, making sure that they know that those workers are meant to try to keep us safe, that the people at hospitals are trying to keep us safe, and that we're going to do everything we can to keep them safe. We can say something like, we can't go to grandma's house right now, but we can FaceTime, or we can call her on the phone. She loves you so much, and that would make her so happy. So again, not only just us who are in immediate proximity to the children, but who else is around who's still keeping them in mind and also wanting them to stay safe. Next slide, please. What also is helpful is to teach kids how to feel like they have some control over and mastery over what's going on. So hand washing is a great skill. It's an important skill for health. And it also will help them feel like, okay, here's what I do. We're gonna wash our hands for 20 seconds. This will get the germs that can make us sick off our hands. What song would you like to sing? So not only are we teaching them a skill, but we're giving them some control and some mastery over the song that they choose in that moment. So we're setting the situation, and then we're giving a choice so that they even feel more efficacious efficacious, more okay with what's happening. We also might teach them how to cover their cough into their elbow. And then we might want to get involved with some positive actions like food banks, maybe need some food that we can get at the grocery store and drop off. Maybe we make some signs for our community. Maybe we create some masks for our community. Maybe there's some way we can help a neighbor. So having kids be able to do something that helps them feel helpful actually also helps them feel safe. Next slide, please. We might concretize, really make plain and clear the daily routine idea by creating a daily schedule. This is an example of one for a particular age child. Your daily schedule has to work for your family. There are many daily schedules that are able to be found online, and they can be a helpful template. But what's really important is that the schedule you create works for your family. It's not something that you can sort of plaster on and then work really hard in a highly stressed way to meet, because we don't need to add stress. What we need to do is make sure that our families are following a daily routine. It could be as simple as wake up time, morning activities, lunchtime, afternoon activities, dinner, and bedtime. It can be more of a skeletal structure, but it's just a way of making sure that we're marking our time throughout the day. And when we do that, we create chunks of time. And those little bits of time actually create more control. We kind of know what's going to happen. Kids tend to feel unsafe when they don't know what's next. And a routine is very clearly telling us what's next. It doesn't have to be every 5 minutes. It can be a couple hours, but I still know what's next. And that's what helps me stay safe. Next slide, please. So children, when they respond to stress, might do a few different things. The first is oftentimes that they're showing us behaviors that tell us that they're stressed. Sometimes we call these misbehaviors. Sometimes they can be experienced as behaviors that challenge us or challenging behaviors. They're oftentimes things that push our buttons. Oftentimes kids are pretty good at doing the stuff that are going to get our buttons pushed, because ultimately what they're trying to do is make a connection. Children who are looking for attention oftentimes want a connection. And so they're figuring out the thing that's going to get them attention. Oftentimes it's the stuff that pushes our buttons, because that's what we pay attention to. So when that happens, it can be very stressful for the adult. And we might see more of those kinds of behaviors, which again are oftentimes considered misbehavior or challenging behaviors, but ultimately they're about the child trying to have some connection. We also might see disruptions in sleeping and eating, which is again why the routines are so critical. We might see agitation. We might see increase in conflicts if we have other family members or people with us in our homes. You might see some physical complaints, that their body starts to hurt or their belly feels weird, or sometimes it can feel like something got stuck in my throat. Our heart beats fast. Anything, I've definitely heard kids say my feet hurt when they're tired, right? So physical complaints can come out at times of stress. And we might have poor concentration or just an inability to motivate. That's also really possible, because ultimately their typical routine has been highly disrupted. So trying to get used to the new routine is difficult. Next slide, please. So how we want to work with this, with the behaviors that we might experience as challenging, is that we want to catch the kids when they're doing what we expect them to do in our home. We want to notice that and provide positive attention. We want to be able to, again, show it in our face, not just in our words. The kids, again, pay more attention to our facial movements, our gestures, and our feeling than what we're saying. We might say, oh, you cleaned up breakfast all by yourself, or oh, your brother was so happy when you read that book to him. We're not just saying good boy, good girl. That doesn't mean much to kids. They don't know why you're saying that. What helps them the most is to be able to be very clear about the thing that you saw them do that you really appreciate. And when they're doing this, especially in times of stress, in some ways, if we make it a huge, huge deal, they're able to feel it even more. Next slide, please. So again, we're sticking to routines, right? The routine of us talking about routines. So sticking to routine is very, very important. Also making sure kids understand what the expectations are. And that's possible that it's changed. It's possible their teacher had a particular expectation for how they might do their journal entry, and then their parents and you might have a different expectation, and they're like, well, who am I supposed to listen to? There also might be just different ways that we are in the home right now than we were ever before. So being able to be clear about what the rules are for what is expected in the home, and to stick to that. Many times we as adults tend to change those rules, and that's what's really confusing for kids. So sticking to what the rules are for expected ways of being in the home can help kids make sure that they're doing what we expect. And then again, we want to anticipate, oh, I know around 5 o'clock they get really tired. And so that might be not the best time to decide we're going to do our math homework, right? Or whatever it might be. We might plan ahead a little bit, plan the times that they need some calm time, plan the times they need to be a little busier. Next slide, please. So what's the most important piece, I think, of making sure that we're addressing these behaviors that we can find challenging is really not about the kids, ultimately. It's about us, that staying calm on our part, being reflective, and then working to reconnect is really what's really important. So we're going to go over these 3 things as strategies for us to learn about how to be with our kids in the home, staying calm, reflecting, and reconnecting. When we are not calm, when we react rather than respond, we tend to sort of make things go up. We talk about co-escalating the situation, and really what we want to do is co-regulate the situation. So we don't want to go up, we want to come down. But before we can do that, even if our child's having a super tantrum and they're, all over the place, we might have the reaction to say, stop. But the first thing we have to do is say stop to ourselves, actually. Big breath. And stay calm. That's step 1. Next slide, please. We can do that by breathing, as I just did. We can count, potentially. Maybe we need to contact someone else in that moment. Sometimes we might just have to be mentalizing what's happening right now. What is this need for connection that this child has right now? Sometimes we haven't done nourishment to ourselves, as George had said before. We need to drink something or have some water or have a snack. Get ourselves to calm first. Step 1. Next slide, please. Step 2 is to be reflective. What is happening? How is the child feeling? What just happened? What feelings are they experiencing? What does this behavior try to communicate? And how can I understand what's happening now? And then step 3, next slide, please. Then we reconnect. We can try to get them to calm, which means, again, we have to be calm ourselves. We might need to offer a choice. We might need to redirect to an activity. We might need to just validate what they're feeling right now. And then we might just need to, again, be available and spend some time. We know that this experience is stressful for us. Even if the kids don't show it or don't talk about it the same way, they are feeling the stress as well. So we might see behaviors we've never seen before. We might see behaviors that sort of don't make any sense in the moment to us. But these 3 steps, to stay calm, to reflect, and to reconnect when those times happen, will not only help the child and our children, but certainly will help us. Next slide, please.
So thank you, Caitlin, very much. That was very informative. We're getting some questions that we'll be hopefully addressing before the end. Now I'd like to introduce, and some of the questions are coming in now from middle school, high school parents. So Tim, I'd like to introduce you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So hopefully I'll address those questions as best I can. I want to be mindful of the time as well. So my name is Tim Conway. I'm I have multiple roles. As we were talking about planning this workshop, I'm a parent of a 5th and 7th grader. I work in a high school, and I'm also a counselor. So I play several different roles, and even with all of us, if you're working from home, you're trying to juggle helping them, your kids with their education, which we'll talk about, and I'll hopefully give you some solutions to help with that. Next slide, please. So Caitlin did an amazing job. So hopefully I'm just going to reiterate some points because they do carry over from level to level, even into middle and high school. But we do have to model self-care. Putting your mask on first, the analogy when you go on an airplane. the masks fall down, you put your mask on first and then help your child. And I applaud again all parents that are willing to give everything to their children. That's very commendable. At the same time, a lot of what you heard with Caitlin is absolutely true. If we're not taking care of ourselves, then we're going to be, especially in a very confined space with our children, our spouses, and others. You may be more on edge, and you do need to let some time for yourself to exercise, to get a good night's sleep, to take a break for yourself during the day, especially if you're juggling multiple hats. You have to do that in order to make sure that you're providing the best situation for yourselves to try to keep everyone calm, as well as for your children, and modeling that. So modeling a calm environment, if you're starting to feel agitated during the day, if your kids are chasing each other around the dining room table, as my kids were doing the other day, sometimes it's good to say, okay, everybody's a little on edge. Let's take a break, as opposed to yelling at them and say, stop chasing each other around the dining room table. You have to just take a minute and say, okay, I think everybody's done for a little bit. Let's take like a 10-minute break. So you have to just be mindful of that. As Caitlin was even saying, take a moment to think first and take some breaths, and we'll go through some other ways to do that. Middle and high school, they're starting to become a little bit more advanced, I guess you could say. They're still maybe concrete a little bit in middle school, and then they're starting to get a little bit more abstract in high school, but they're becoming more aware. They have, some of them maybe have cell phones, access to computers, both iPads. I mean, so many technological devices these days. Trying to make sure that you are moderating what they are seeing in the news and sharing with each other. Not that you don't want them to know it, as Caitlin and even George were saying. You just want to make sure that they're getting the information that's appropriate for their developmental age. Now, if you have a high school student that's very advanced and you want to talk about it and turn it into some sort of a science discussion on the rates and trends of the number of positive cases and how they're trying to moderate that so that the cases go down and not overwhelm the health system. If you want to go crazy, cool, great, but you want to make sure it's developmentally appropriate for your child. And I just wanted to put that bullet in there too, the last bullet, where some kids prefer to draw things out or act them out or write them out, or some kids are better with just talking. So we have to just be mindful of our child and what their best method is to get out their frustrations. Next slide, please. So I really liked, as I was thinking about this, everyone's like, oh, I'm stuck home, I can't do anything. And I even put that image in there as I can't do it. We have an opportunity to even turn a negative into a positive one. So it's a mindset, it's how we're thinking about things. And again, trying to model that calm environment for our children. I think this is an important thing to kind of keep in mind. How can you spin it with them and say, okay, we're stuck home. That is a reality. These things are going on. But how can we turn this around? So do you do a family project where you're trying to thank first responders on the internet? Or through posters, or on your front lawn, or in your windows, or whatever you want to do. Create a video for your kids' class or family chat so that your kids can see their friends. I think my kids are desperate to connect with their friends, and they're doing that through things like I know there's a lot in the news, but Zoom or Google Meet and FaceTime type of chats. So let them find ways to connect with their friends so that there's some sense of normalcy. We were even talking, I was throwing out an idea for you as parents, maybe connecting with your school districts on, or even the yearbook club, or even the counseling office about, for high schools, talking about a slideshow, putting together a slideshow that can be put onto the internet, celebrating kids in maybe the transition years, 5th to 6th, 7th to 8th, 12th and beyond, depending on what happens through the rest of the year, where you can have, the kids with an image and a quote, their favorite quote, or their hopes for next year as they transition to the high school, or their future plans with a picture of them, what college they might be going to, or what trade school and what have you. Different ideas, again, to celebrate, especially given the circumstances. Some other things also would be some mindfulness activities, and I've put a link here for when you get the PowerPoint presentation. Caitlin was talking about some mindful breathing, and I'll be perfectly honest, before I became a counselor, you'd hear about this mindfulness stuff, and I'm like, tish tosh, that, how much is that going to really work anyways? And I'll tell you, I laugh at myself, at my former self as a younger adolescent, and I'm like, wow, this is really powerful. Just being able to sit and breathe and taking a few moments to just be there and be in the moment and stop thinking. I'm a very type A personality, so just stopping the flow of thoughts and the stress, it can be very helpful. Just 4 deep breaths in, take a moment, and then breathe through your mouth and push it out is really, really super helpful. Just be mindful of that breathing, nothing else. Even eating, like what you're eating, whether it could be an apple, an orange, just being mindful of the, the texture of it, the flavors, etc. Being aware of your surroundings, just being outside can be very therapeutic for you as well as for the children and your adolescents. What are you seeing on your walks or on your hikes? So all these things are different ways that you can kind of, again, just take a break sometimes as your kids are chasing each other around the dining room table, as I said, and do something as a family and, again, bring down and come to a more restful state so you can think clearly. Next slide, please. So Caitlin talked about this one, but the same applies at the high school and middle school levels. These are all different physical responses, so it's good to be mindful of these things as you're working through your day. If your kids are acting out in different ways than they don't normally, and I think that's the best way to think about it, is what are they doing that might not be typical of their normal behavior? Are they becoming more agitated, or are they having struggles, concentrating on their schoolwork, and they're getting up and just storming out of the dining room, or just being aware and mindful of those. And also for yourself in terms of, if things are already pushing your buttons, having everyone around, or if there's certain things like, a child's not getting their homework done normally, and that gets you frustrated, being mindful of those things that already frustrate you is really important, so that way, again, you can be thinking in your head ahead of time, if this happens, I'm already going to try to calm myself down. I'm not going to immediately get frustrated. I'm going to try to work to resolve this with my children. Next slide, please. So in terms of organization, as Caitlin said, you want to create a structured time. I think this is really super important, because the day can get completely away from you. You can end up, stuck in your pajamas all day long very easily, and not even leave your room and watch TV all day. And I don't think that's helpful for trying to get into a routine, to getting work done, to getting exercise. You have to keep some kind of routine to keep yourself motivated and going. And the same goes for your children. There's a link in there too in terms of staying organized. So sometimes as parents, we struggle with, what tools can we use with our kids to stay organized? I was thinking about this with my 10-year-old when this first started, who, he had never had to organize himself. The school had always organized him in terms of what things he had to do each day. And so when he started to get all things in emails and Google Classrooms, he became very, very overwhelmed. So how can you help them with little tools to write down or organize themselves, so that way they know how what they have to do and when they've completed everything and are not getting overwhelmed? Again, keeping a normal routine, I'm not going to reiterate that again, but it's super important. Next slide, please. So scheduling issues are a reality. And that little image over there is a nice little tool you could use, but sharing space is a challenge, sharing technology. You can share your technology in a way by setting a schedule with your kids. So if you have 3 kids at home, maybe there's different time windows of who's doing their schoolwork throughout the day, especially if there's only one computer, let's say. So that way it's a staggered schedule. So it gives an opportunity for one kid to be working at a time. You're not stuck going in 3 different directions trying to help each of your children at the same time as also dealing with technology issues, or maybe one needs or both need the computer at the same time. Instead of that, stagger the schedule so that way you can provide your own individual attention, help to each individual child, and stagger the schedule as an example. Next slide, please. Oh, so technology issues. So if you're like me, you became a part-time educator for your kids and technology expert all at the same time. So these are some of the issues that, I know I encountered with my kids being home. We didn't have computers at first for all the kids, and myself working from home at the same time. It was Wi-Fi even available that crashed? Do you even have it available at home? For those that do have Wi-Fi at home, one of the nice things is that they should not be turning off your Wi-Fi in any way, shape, or form. If they do, please contact your Wi-Fi provider. That should not be happening at this point. Power, Wi-Fi are all things that should be getting not be turned off during the pandemic now. Some of your children are struggling learning in a computer, a virtual world, if you will. If your students have a disability or other issues at home, does the internet crash? These are all issues we'll talk about and have some possible solutions. Next slide, please. So I think one thing is ask your district for help. I think many districts have been really, really great with this, and some parents don't know this, is if you don't have a computer, there's many school districts that were giving computers home to families to try to help with them having to not deal with multiple kids trying to need the computer at the same time. So each one has their own device. So that is a possibility. Some schools are even, if you're economically disadvantaged, if you're struggling with finances, some schools have Wi-Fi routers or free Wi-Fi in the community that they can refer you to if you need access to the internet. Some school districts sending home paper copies. You just need to request that to the school districts. And they're working, depending on the students and their accommodations, they're trying to work with those students to get out paper copies of the documents. The child doesn't learn well via the computer. Help them to create the structure, as I said, like that task chart, schedule in timed breaks. If you know your child after about an hour is, starting to act out and get frustrated, schedule it that way, so that way they're only working for an hour at a time, or whatever that time is. And then that way you're getting up and you're going out and you're giving them time to, do whatever it is, or free time, so that way they can come back refreshed. It sounds funny, but just restarting the computer oftentimes can help solve many issues. It's funny, but it does work quite often. And sometimes if you're trying to troubleshoot an issue, YouTube is a good resource if things are not working. Next slide, please. Who can you ask for help? I think, again, the school has been very helpful. I'm biased, of course, but from a parental perspective, I've been talking to my kids' school, and they've been very, very attentive and helpful, and mindful that this is a learning experience as the teachers have migrated very quickly to a digital world with the education. So they're being very, very workable with parents and students to try to make adjustments along the way. So talk to an administrator, talk to a teacher, talk to their teachers, talk to their school counselor, talk to their case manager if they have an IEP, an individualized education plan. Ask your child or family and friends for help. A lot of different people sometimes have expertise, and maybe they're really great in math or have a math degree, and you're struggling with helping them with their math work. Look up activities and other resources in this PowerPoint at the end, even in the resource section. A great resource I'd refer you to is Khan Academy. The kids can see video and audio how to actually solve different problems. Really, really great tool. And maybe you even have, if there's a need, you can call a mental health counselor. A lot of mental health counselors and other providers are doing telemental health right now because people are not able to go out. Next slide, please. So again, at the end of the day, the goal is to try to keep these schedules and routines because we want to get back to some sense of normalcy, and it makes the transition back later down the road a little bit easier. But again, what are those things that are normal for you in your everyday experiences? Are they drawing? Are they running and walking? Are they going fishing, having a catch? A social happy hour through Zoom or some of these other video platforms to get together with friends. Again, that's self-care. It's just sitting outside and enjoying the outside air environment and nature. Do you enjoy gardening? Whatever floats your boat, ultimately at the end of the day, it's things that are your normal. You want to try to maintain that. Next slide, please. These are some resources here, but I know that there still is something that we want to transition over to George Scott one more time. So George, I'm going to kick it back to you after this. And you can go to the next slide. These are just some resources you'll have some access to after the PowerPoint. George, you're up.
George?
A lot of information. You don't need it all. Some of you may need more than others. But one of the things to keep in mind is that you have to trust yourself. You're a good mom or a good dad or a good grandparent. You're a good adult. Trust your instincts sometimes too, as you hold your family together until we evolve onto the other side of this virus. Remember, sleep, nutrition, exercise. You can hear both from Caitlin and Tim. It just finds its way through all age groups, including yourself. Sleep, nutrition, exercise. It's a human need. And if you can then rely on and trust meditation or calming or breathing, your body is going to respond positively and your mind is going to respond positively. So you can see some recommendations go across the age groups.
Thanks, George.
One of the things that I was also thinking is use your influence. These were ideas, and there are lots of other ideas, but they're really ideas to stimulate your creativity. It's so much more fun when things come from the adult in the family. How about, I was thinking, maybe we can, maybe we should. All of a sudden, your kids have a different way of following the leader, of you being the Pied Piper and them following along. Things in which you tell family stories that maybe because of crazy schedules at other times, you're never able to share. Create your own ancestry of who this side of the family is and who that side of the family is. So there are things that can be done simply because you have strength. Families, regardless of what they look like, have power. Is there another slide to finish up?
No, that's pretty much it, George.
Good.
You know what? We have about 3 minutes for questions. David, you've been monitoring the questions. Do you have a couple that you really want to
Sure.
pose?
So there's a couple of quick themes. I'll mention recurring questions. We had a number of questions about the loss of certain rites of passage that can't be replaced, graduation ceremonies, proms, other important events happening at whatever grade level the student is at. How can parents help their children through those things that we're not going to be able to replicate?
And any one of the people on the panel can respond to that.
I think a good thing to do is reach out to your school and see if they're going to do some virtual celebration. A lot of schools are doing that planning now, and as we get closer and closer to the end of the traditional school year, you might find that you can plug into that.
And I think this is Tim Conway too. I think this is unprecedented. So schools, as I shared some of my kind of creative ideas that I'm playing with, is talking with our yearbook club and doing some sort of slideshow celebrating the kids over time. Whether it's through 5th and transitioning to 6th and so forth. You as parents, we would welcome your thoughts and ideas as well to be a part of this process to turn something into a digital, some sort of celebration of the kids, given some of the normal things that would have happened this time of the year may not happen in that exact form, but maybe it can be in some sort of a similar form or digital form to celebrate their transitions.
And I'll just add that the more we can also it's a loss, and to name it that and to allow for it to feel that way. And then, then there's solutions we could come up to. But sometimes we get scared about naming the fact that it's a loss. It's a lot of losses for all of us. And to be there with them with that feeling and allow that feeling to happen can actually make the feeling move through faster.
Let me mention one other recurring set of questions we had. If you have multiple children in the home, sometimes the amount of work that they're being asked to do can feel overwhelming. And you might have many kids being asked to, be online at the same time. What tips do we have for parents if they're struggling and feeling overwhelmed and their kids are feeling overwhelmed because the work is all coming at once with multiple children?
I can talk to that one. I again, as a parent seeing it on one end, and as an educator on the other end, I totally understand. Like I said, be transparent. The schools are dealing with an unprecedented challenge here, and are literally changing and flipping the entire school structure virtual overnight. So things are going to be a little bit different as opposed to having that teacher and that instructor right there in front of them. The environment is completely different. So don't be afraid to reach out to the school, whether it be to the teacher, to the administrator, a counselor, or someone, as I mentioned in my part of the presentation, and I think that goes for at any level, and say, my kids are just completely overwhelmed, like the work is just too much. And it could just be because that might have been what has happened in a typical part of the year, but not having the back and forth dialogue during the classroom discussion to actually fully digest it. It's taking the students, it's taking the kids a little bit longer to process through that information because there's more of that back and forth through email, and teachers aren't able to go as fast as they normally would during the year. So some people have to realize that they have to make some adjustments, but unless they hear that feedback from you, they may not know that there needs to be adjustments on their end from an educational standpoint. And I think staggering the schedule would be a good idea. Either ask the school for another device or stagger the schedule so that way you're not feeling like you're torn in 3 different directions trying to help your kids.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who participated in this and also to the development team. At the end of this set of slides, you will see all the people who were involved with the development team, as well as the team who actually did the presentation today. And you can see it's quite numerous. Also, I'd like to remind you that we have 2 more webinars coming up. The next one, this was the first one of the series. The next one is next Thursday, the 23rd, and it's meeting the needs of students with disabilities. And given some of the questions I was seeing, that might be helpful for those of you who are having some difficulty getting your youngsters to do the work. The final one will be, the final one in the series, will be Tuesday, April 28th, and that will be using social media responsibly to engage your kids. So I think from what I'm seeing in questions, that will also be something that you will find engaging. We really appreciate the number of people who have been participating. And are there any final closing comments from Pat or Kathy?
No, just thank everyone for coming on.
Okay, and we will try to get all your questions answered soon. You will get a copy of this PowerPoint. This is, first of all, it was recorded, so it will be available on our website at NJPSA-FEA, as well as on the NJPTA website. And since you are participating, you'll get a copy of this in your email in a day or so. And I can say that your questions, certainly, we've been talking about what we're going to do as follow-ups because this was very quick. And it had to be because we needed to address some of these things. But your questions certainly are going to lead us to a further development of more webinars. And we're just trying to get these 3 done now, but then we were talking about what we can do in May and June, if we still need that. So thank you very much. And thanks to all the presenters, and have a good evening. And
Good
just
evening.
be mindful.
Be safe and be healthy.